Good evening, everyone. So glad that you could come out tonight. We welcome all those who are watching with us online also. Tonight's speaker is Dr. Raymond Guarendi. He is a highly acclaimed speaker and the author of numerous books, including Jesus, the Master Psychologist, Thinking Like Jesus, and Raising Upright Kids in an Upside-Down World. His TV show, Living Right with Dr. Ray, can be seen at EWTN, and I believe it's 13th season, Dr. Ray, is that right? His radio show, The Doctor Is In, can also be heard on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network through Sirius XM, iHeartRadio, and over 500 AM and FM radio affiliates. So pleasure to have you, Dr. Ray. We've been looking forward to you for a couple of months to come, and we look forward to hearing your wisdom and experience with 10 kids. So without further ado, Dr. Ray.
Jesus, Moses, and an elderly-looking gentleman were golfing. Moses steps up to hit the first shot. Terrible shot. Heads straight for the pond. Moses runs up to the pond. Parts of water. Ball bounced across the bottom of the pond up onto the fairway. Jesus says, "Fine shot, Moses." The elderly-looking gentleman's thinking, how do you compete with these guys? Jesus steps up. Terrible shot. Heads straight for the pond. Hits the water. And sits. Jesus walks across the water. Stands. Chips the ball up onto the fairway. Moses says, "You too, save your fine shot." Elderly-looking gentleman's thinking, what did I get myself into? He steps up. Hits the worst shot of the three. 30 yards, slices into the rough behind an oak tree, sits there till a big gust of wind comes out, blows the ball out onto the fairway into the pond where it sinks to the bottom in the mud. Big carp grabs the ball, leaps the water, hangs at an apex for about 6 seconds. Starling comes out of the woods, grabs the ball out of the carp's mouth, flies 325 yards down the fairway, drops the ball onto the green. Squirrel comes out of the woods, nudges the ball into the cup for a hole-in-one. Jesus turns, says, "That's a nice shot, Dad." My wife is a convert to the Catholic faith. She had a tough time with confession. She understood the theology, but she couldn't get it through her head that when you go to confession, you got to confess your own sins, not your husband's. Bless me, Father, Ray has sinned. She made her first confession when she was 39. Gentlemen, you read these marriage books, they all tell you the same thing. Be on your knees for your wife. All right? She goes in the confessional. I get on my knees. And I stay there the whole time she's in there. So I took a week off from work. She comes out. "Honey, what do you think?" "Well, you're right, Ray. I feel clean." Good. So, what'd you tell Father?" "I'm not telling you that. You could tell me you're not bound by the seal. I'm not telling you, Ray. I figured it out. If you want to know what your spouse or your kid tells Father in the confessional, you kind of got to go in the back door. So, honey, what did you get for penance?" Now, if you know what they got for penance, you can kind of reason backward to how rot gut they were. She said, "I guess I could tell you that. Got a rosary." "A rosary? It's not bad for 40 years of pagan muck." She said, "With the stations of the cross at every bead." Oh, kind of wish you'd have told me that before I married you. I still got to kiss you. Then she asked me, "Okay, Ray, what do you usually get for penance?" "Me? Most of the time? Half a sign of the cross. Sometimes a quarter. That's hardly enough time to levitate." His father was mentioning the part about the 10 children is true. That's why I'm here. It's quieter here and it smells better. When people find out I got 10 kids, I always get this. All right, now that you got your own kids, what have you learned? I learned something very critical. I rarely took them out in public. You take them out in public, invariably, they're going to pull some stunt. Embarrasses the heck out of you. People know you're a shrink, it's worse. You could almost hear them thinking out loud, let's just see what Mr. Psycho Man's going to do about this one. But I figure it this way. Many of you have raised your children. You know this. First 9, 10 years of life out in public, they embarrass us. After that, Dad, you embarrass them. Oh, man, come on, Dad. Don't wear the pants with the feathers. Dad, don't wave at me when people are looking right at us, and I'm not going to pull your finger. People will ask me, and many of you notice this because you have raised your children. What's going on out there? Why are so many big people, where the little people are concerned, are now so frustrated, so guilt-ridden, so unsure of themselves, so tentative, so insecure? What is going on? Number one request I get from parents and grandparents, by far, discipline. Okay, Mr. Expert Man, you tell me how to get him to stay in bed. I can't get him to stay in bed. Chews his way down through the bedroom floor, drops into the family room. I'm back. You'll never be free. You'll never have another child. I'll be in your bed till I'm 16, that's why. And that girl's mouth, that snotty, snarly, you know, if I'd have talked to my parents that way, my head would have been rolling down the hallway. And the school people, they don't help. You know what they did last year? They closed during June, July, and August. I actually had to live with my own child during the daytime. What has happened from the time that you've raised your children to the time some of these younger folks have raised theirs? What has happened? You know, many of you probably had 3, 4, 5 kids. Nowadays, if somebody hears you got 4 kids, one of the number one things they're going to say is, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how I can't handle the 2 that I have. People used to ask us, are these all your children? I'd say, no, of course not. The oldest is at home with the triplets. Do you know what's changed? The culture's changed radically. We got that. Big. But there's been something else that's changed that's undercut authority, peace of mind, resolve, strength of will. Big factor. It changed the way you grandparents raised your kids, and these younger people are raising theirs. And that factor is standing in front of you. The shrinks, the experts. I'm everywhere, crawling all over women's magazines, all over television, radio, putting out thousands of books, articles every year. Net message. What do you know? You're just a mother. Yeah, you can stumble your way along. Hopefully you won't foul it up too bad. But you want to do this right? The new, modern, psychologically enlightened way? Yep. Got to be state certified, congressionally mandated, child development ring, Psychomental International on Oprah. Specialist. People will say to me, help. I want to discipline less. Give me a technique to discipline less. I got it. Best I ever see. You want to discipline any kid or grandkid less? Simply do one thing. Lower your standards. That's all. You get them low enough, you don't have to discipline at all. I told you, quit doing drugs in the living room when we have company. We discipline because we love. You know that? Every one of you in here loves that kid or grandkid. That's why I don't get in front of groups like this and say, you need to be more positive. You need to be more affirming. 5+ statements for every neutral statement for maximum self-esteem results. Look at you folks. You come out on a Sunday night, a nice Sunday night, to listen to some shrink prattle on about parenthood or grandparenthood. You're loving, caring people. Either that or you got no life whatsoever. Either way, thanks for being here. I was 3 years old. I said this to my mom. I don't like you. She looked at me. Raymond, you're a little behind. I stopped liking you last year. That was back before you could psychologically smack parents around, you know. One of my kids tells me I don't like you, so what? I got 5 or 6 who do. Any given moment, I got a 50% approval rating. I tell folks, discipline without love may be harsh. Love without discipline is child abuse. Because you see, ultimately, the child's going to get disciplined. Undisciplined kids are going to get disciplined. If you don't do it now because you feel guilty or you're afraid he won't like you, or your mother-in-law already thinks you're the biggest she-witch to fly the face of the earth, we're turning our kids over to them. They will discipline them. A judge, a landlord, an army sergeant, a police officer, an employer. I shudder at this next one. A wife. Somebody's going to teach them. And the world hurts. There's an interesting phenomenon that occurs in my office. A parent will come in, they'll describe about this much trouble. Then they'll say this, I think I'm giving you the wrong impression. Overall, he's a pretty good kid. How is that? Well, he's not on drugs or anything like that. One of the new moral high bars, he's not on drugs. I ask my clients, what do you want looking back at you at age 22? What would you hope to be able to say about that child? Now, no guarantees, especially with that culture. But what would you hope to be able to say? If you're content to say, well, giving the way kids are turning out nowadays, I'm counting my blessings. Parole officer says one of the nicest kids he has. I tell him, you don't have to parent that hard. You don't have to grandparent that hard. Just be like those folks out there. You'll probably have a kid not on drugs. But if you wish to look at that kid at age 22 and say something like this, I think he's 1 in 100. Morals, character, compassion. That's a beautiful human being. I challenge him. I say, are you ready to be 1 in 100? See, you can't be like them anymore. They supervise here. They think they're strict. They should be supervising here. They're giving out social freedom 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years too early. Technological freedom 5, 6, 7 years too early. And many of you have raised your children. And you've raised your children in a culture that really wasn't on your side. But you did it. You persevered. You stood strong. And then, in the end, you didn't get credit for it. You are so lucky. You just got good kids. You have Chastity and Angelica. I didn't get good kids. I got Chucky, Damien, Cujo, and Lucifer. Like it was the luck of the draw, I just got bad kids. The experts do not think like you. Go to the computer, type in child, self-esteem, search. Last I looked, over 100 million options. The experts believe that self-esteem is the moral virtue of all moral virtues, even though the research says it's related to nothing. Type in child, humility, search. A fraction. When's the last time you heard an expert talk about humility? But for Christians, expert humility is at the very center of our virtues. My humility is something I'm very proud of. I got a new book coming out. The 3 most humble people I know and how I taught the other 2. Can you imagine our Lord going up to the apostles? Simon, there for a while I had toyed with changing your name to Peter, but I decided against it. I didn't know what that would do to your self-image. You've always seen yourself as a Simon. I go changing your identity now. I don't know what ill effects that might have psychologically. However, I spoke to my father, and he and I agreed, you have a future in this operation. If you can conceive it, you can believe it. If you can believe it, you can achieve it. 12 more weeks of Tony Robbins management courses, Simon. You'll run this outfit. I want to go to confession like the politicians. Bless me, Father. Mistakes were made. And I'd like to apologize if God took something I said out of context. misinterpreted it, and became offended by it. I'm sorry for his sensitivity. My 10 children at one point were 12, 11, 10, 10, 9, 7, 4, 3, 2, and baby. The remote broke. Told my wife, get batteries. What am I going to do the next minute or two? My 10 children are all adopted, all 10 of them. I don't know if any of you are adopted parents. This is a great benefit of adoption. Agencies won't tell you this. I figured it out about the fourth kid. If you adopt in December, you still get the tax deduction for the whole year. They pay for themselves that first year, then you start to fall behind because they eat more. But if you cut back into food, you can break even September, October. My wife and I have had this ongoing conflict. It's gotten worse as we've gotten more children. Ladies, I believe you will agree with me. First of all, my wife does not work for a living. I don't know what she does. When you quote me, I'll deny I was even here. I've seen what the woman does. I want no part of what the woman does. When the kids were little, she'd take them to the grocery store. I'd go. If I was heavily sedated, I would go. Had to see it strung out behind her like ducks, you know, hands at their sides, not allowed to touch anything. They would not deviate 6 inches either way out of a straight line the whole 2 hours they were in there. No, they wouldn't. Leg irons wouldn't let them. I got 3 white kids, 2 Hispanic kids, 2 biracial kids, 3 black kids. People would look at my wife. Some of them were pretty bold. Is some kind of club or something? Some of them wouldn't say a whole lot, but I could read their eyes. That major dork don't realize them ain't all his. I suspect her, but I can't catch her. My children have what the experts would call risk factors. Now, in psychological parlance, a risk factor is anything that would make a kid tougher to raise. Poor prenatal care, poor postnatal care, abuse in the womb, neglect in the womb, high maternal stress, low birth weights, heavy drug exposure, crack, narcotics, barbiturates, heroin, cocaine, nicotine, marijuana, alcohol. My son Peter, birth mom was told, you're pregnant, don't worry about it. There's a blood clot growing next to the baby. Baby grows, blood clot grows. Blood clot suffocates baby. Problem solved. The problem made it. He was born 2 months premature, 1 month intensive care, but Petey made it. My daughter Elizabeth. Birth mom got pregnant in the 7th grade. Went to Akron, Ohio to get her problem taken care of. She didn't realize she was in her 7th month. Now, you see, you know this. In the 7th month, little babies are bigger. I mean, you can't just flush them out, suck them out. You got to pull them out, and when you pull them out, they don't come out in one piece. You got to crush their skull, and you got to rip their arms and legs off. That's how you get them out. You get them out by the piece. Well, that little 13-year-old girl panicked, called us the next day. We were not expecting a 10th kid. We thought we were done at 9. I guess you could say Lizzie was an unplanned adoption. We weren't practicing safe phone. My son Samuel, 2 weeks before due date, 35-year-old birth mom was told something is terribly wrong. You mind if we test? Tentative diagnosis, corpus callosum agenesis. Severe neurological birth defect. Worst case scenario, that's institution for life. You got to believe everybody in this birth mom's whole world was against her having Sammy. That's why we do this kind of testing. You know that? This child's going to have no life. He's going to be in an institution. You got to do the right thing. She did the right thing. She gave birth to Sammy. Sammy goes by Sergeant G at Fort Hood. It was a shadow on the ultrasound. The test was totally inaccurate. So my kids have this confluence of developmental gunk, that should make them harder to raise and slower to socialize and more impulsive and more immature and slower to form consciences and more learning problems, more oddities in their temperaments. I do have some like that. I would not consider any of my 10 children strong-willed. But this dude is one toke over the line, sweet Moses. How could you have 10 kids under those circumstances, not consider any of them strong-willed when parents, grandparents? You now know how everybody describes children. Mind of her own, stubborn streak a mile wide. This child is so independent, so determined. She's going to do what she wants. 18, 8 gone on 18. That's what the child is. 8, very high maintenance youngster, very high maintenance, challenging child, very oppositional child, difficult child. Difficult child is redundant. Am I delusional? I don't think so. I think there's a simple explanation. The strongest willed of my 10 children is not stronger willed than his mother. We got so many strong-willed kids out there nowadays, people, because the big people have lost will. We're not as sure of ourselves. I ask my clients, if you told your little 5-year-old, please go to the corner, just like that, please go to the corner, 5 words, would he? The vast majority of parents cannot get that child to go to the corner without an argument, without a fit, without coming out 26 times, without a look that says, yeah, who's going to put me there? You? What has happened, dear people? What is going on? I'll tease my clients. What would your mother have done had you talked to her the way your daughter is talking to you? No, I didn't. Why not? You were a teenage girl once. I may have felt like it, but I didn't do it very often. Why? I knew. You knew what? Something would happen. What? I don't know. Why don't you know? It never happened. Why didn't it happen? I never did it. Why didn't you do it? Something would have happened. What? I don't know. Who's on first? I don't know. Third base! It's an Abbott and Costello routine, but you see what it speaks of, dear people? You think back to your own parents and you say, I never would have dreamed of doing that. Why not? You were a kid once. Why not? The difference is, I call it the perception of authority. Remember the look? Many of you had the look, or your parents had the look. You look at a kid now, he looks back at you. What are you looking at? You want a piece of this? My dad used to bounce the look off our heads at church, all the way down the pew till it got to me. Had enough juice left in it that I wet myself. Get up, go to communion, come back, stand at the edge of the pew, look holy. And when you look holy, you got to tilt your head. And I'd let my sisters go in. And the Italian Catholic ladies would think, now see that? That is what a young man is supposed to be like. He's going to be a priest. No, he'll skip priest, straight to cardinal. That's not why. I didn't want to sit the rest of Mass in urine. I learned a lot from my psychology from my father. My father went to God before I was born. Excuse me, Lord, I'm going to raise a whole bunch of kids. I don't want to complicate the whole affair. Give me 8 or 10 phrases. I'll just reuse them over and over. We got a lot of dads in here. A lot of dads, a lot of grandpas. Guys are not as versatile as moms. We all kind of stamped out of the same mold. I finally figured out why that is. You know how moms have to go to Lamaze classes to learn how to be Maz? She's looking at me like that. I leave the iron on. Dads must go to La Paz classes. First time I heard this, well, I was 3 years old. You gonna cry? I'm gonna give you something to cry about. First of all, I'd ever to fling that one around. Raymond, you go get me something to spank you with. The fathers are generous people. My dad was always giving me something. Dad, I can't shovel the snow. I got a bellyache. Raymond, I'm going to give you a bellyache. Your father's always giving you something. You're not going to find I'm going to give you a bellyache in any parenting book. I've looked. It's not there. By today's enlightened psychological standards, my father was a barbarian, a parenting Neanderthal. Judge it by the acid question, not was he psychologically correct. You know, folks, culture's in big trouble when psychological correctness is replacing moral correctness. When more and more people are asking, is it normal, rather than, is it right? It's perfectly normal for a 3-year-old to melt down on you. It's not good. 14-year-olds can get snotty, disrespectful, if you let them. It's not right. Question is not, is it normal? Question is it good and right? Sin is normal. My dad dropped out of high school during World War II. He wasn't what the experts would call psychologically slick. He had a 50% success rate in his discipline. That's sky high. By the way, you know the definition of impending middle age? It's when your wife gives up intimacy for Lent and you don't realize it till Monday after Easter. These guys are looking at me like, what's your point, man? We know when Lent is, January 6th to August 28th. When are they going to shorten up that church calendar there, Father? How'd my dad do this? 2 things. He loved me desperately. I knew it. I know all of you love your kids, grandkids desperately. I know this. But it's the second part of the equation that is now giving even the most loving, caring, involved parents fits. When my dad said to me, Raymond, I asked you once, please, leave your sister alone. Have a seat. Don't get up till I tell you. I had a seat. I couldn't think of getting up. Not because I was some mild-mannered kid. I was a normal kid. But that was Dad. He had authority. He wasn't mean. He wasn't nasty. He wasn't some jackbooted thug. But he just had quiet, strong, confident authority. I deal with so many good parents who just struggle to enjoy their kid because they've been shaped and twisted by all the modern psychological ideas. And they stop. I wanted to have 4 kids, but I stopped at 2. 2 is all I can handle. It's true. We live in an interesting culture, don't we, folks? We live in a culture that says you can have sexual relations with anyone, anywhere, anytime, anyhow. The only time we'll give you grief is when you're a married mother with more than 2 children. Then we will abuse you. Do you know how this is happening? Don't you have a TV? You're sucking up the rainforest. What's wrong with you? How many mothers tell me they go into their OBGYN's office pregnant for the 3rd time, and you know what they get? Pamphlets on how to stop this. Do you know that I'm veering off topic, I don't want to go too far off, but you know that close to 80 to 100 of the developing countries in the world have below replacement rates. The U.S. is one of them. Women have to have roughly a 2.1 children to replace the generation. The U.S. is down about 1.8 right now. Italy's 1.2. Japan is down around 1.1. You get to a point where you can't replace yourself. And the interesting thing that's happening, despite what they said, we're not having a population explosion. We're having a population implosion. There's going to be too many of us older folks for the younger folks. I digress, but it's the point to be made that marriage and children, it's kind of one option, it isn't the best. It's just one, kind of, sort of. 6 of my kids we got at infancy, 4 we got later. Twins were the worst. Twins had a wretched history. Birth mom ingested every toxin she could get a hold of. We don't know where they were the first year and a half of their life. She just shunted them all over the place. Children's Services finally caught up to her, put them in a foster care setting. The foster parents were sweet people, but they didn't discipline them. Remember what I said about love without discipline is child abuse? We've since found out that my son and daughter, John and Joanna, had a chance to be adopted prior to us, twice prior to us. Both families backed out. They met the children and they reacted. Ooh, no thank you. We were hoping for something a little more along the lines of a child. See what I mean, dear people? That little boy and girl, 4 years old, lost a mommy and a daddy, not once but twice. Why? Because of their conduct. Why? Because the big people didn't do what the big people needed to do. And other big people looked at him and said, not you, you're warped. I gotta admit, it didn't look too good. First few visits there, Johnny punches me in the face, attempts to strangle my wife, kicks the foster father about 14 times during one of his multiple eruptions. We walked out of there. My wife had just developed a tick. She was going like this. And she said to me, Ray, I think we got to rethink this. I don't think the tax deduction's worth it. I said, honey, 2 tax deductions plus the credits. They never made Johnny go to bed. He refused bed. He resisted bed. He battled bed. 2.5 years worth. First weekend visit to our house, my wife says, Raymond, why don't you put the children to bed tonight? Honey, I'll give you $100 if you do it. I don't have time for that. I'm writing a parenting book. All right, come on, guys, let's go. Now, everybody came running except Johnny. Johnny just stood there. No, go bed. I'm not a big fella, but all my life I've been a weightlifter, and I know one thing for certain. I am still stronger than the biggest, baddest 4-year-old in the whole world. The child is going to go to bed. So I went over, I bent down, kind of like the veterinarians tell you, don't tower over a wild animal. Let him smell your hand. I put my hands on his shoulders. Now, he could tell by my grip, this was, how shall we say, a non-negotiable psychological interface. Now, at that point, he erupts. Head starts spinning around. Green stuff's coming out. I'm going, Damien, put the chainsaw down, Damien. He's leaking out of every body orifice. Now, Father, I don't know if this is theologically correct, but I got a theory that God put holes in them to leak off pressure. Now most of them leak up here, but you can get leakers down here. You really can. And sometimes you get a puker. Now, the interesting thing about a puker is they sort of develop out of it. You can only get yourself upset for the first year or two and you puke, and then after that you can't do it anymore. But hey, wouldn't it be great? Now think about this. He picks you up for the first date. You're not real crazy about the guy. But he says to you, hey, can I call you again? You don't say a word. You go over to his passenger door, you lean in. Even he could pick up on that nonverbal. Johnny wasn't going to go to bed. He fell out. So I picked him up, put him over my head, convey an impression, off to the side because he's dripping. Took him to the bed, put him in bed, put my hands on him, and just held him totally, completely immobile. He couldn't move. I didn't hurt him. We'd already said prayers. We'd already brushed teeth. They'd visited many, many times, knew I was going to be daddy. I said, Johnny, bedtime, son. Daddy's not going to let you get up until I decide you're going to stay. And if you get up after I leave, son, I'm coming back. You should have seen the look in his face. I went from Disney World to the county jail. My son Andrew was 6. He's the oldest. At that time, we had 6'5", 4'4", 3'1". Andrew's up in the top bunk. Andrew, would you talk to your brother, please? Johnny, Daddy says go to bed. You better go to bed. I remember one time I didn't go to bed. You're not going to like what's going to happen. You know that, John? You think he's going to leave? He doesn't leave, John. He's going to go out in the hallway. He's going to wait for you. And then if you come out, he's going to crack your bottom. He don't care what the caseworker says. Andrew, that's enough. You sound like Mom. How long do you think I had to hold that boy before he went? It was under a minute. How could this be? 2.5 years of resisting bedtime under a minute? Is that because I'm such a great disciplinarian? My wife's a far better disciplinarian than I am. Perception. This guy looks like he means it. This guy doesn't look like he's going to back away. I wasn't nasty. I wasn't screaming. I never even raised my voice. Perception. Plus, I had a tattoo put right there. Said born to kick butt. Don't mishear me. You can get carried away. My dad got carried away. He said things made me neurotic. Raymond, you shut your mouth and eat. I'll teach you to backtalk your mother, young man. Come on, Dad, I already know how. I'll show you to hit your brother. Go ahead. You fall out of that tree, break both your legs, don't come running to me. My mom's discipline philosophy was a shade different. My mom's philosophy was you never say in 7 words what you can say in 67,000. I'd be in the backyard oblivious to my mother trying to get me in the house for supper when the torrent of words would begin. Here's a cardinal law of discipline. You talk 200 to 400 words a minute with gusts up to 800. You're throwing ping pong balls at the hull of an aircraft carrier for all the impact you're having. This is not the organ of discipline. If this thing isn't backed up, don't open it. It just has a tendency to get loud and nasty. My mother would start. Raymond Nicholas Garendi, how many times are you going to make me call you Buster? You know, buddy boy, you seem to think I talk just to hear myself talk. You seem to think I like the sound of my own voice. Well, I'm going to tell you something. You better listen, and you better listen good, because I'm not going to say again. I was not put on this earth to serve you. There are 5 other people in this house. You think it'll evolve our schedule around yours? You're going to come waltzing here, pluck your bucket down when you're darn good and ready. Feed me, because I'm hungry. And I'm going to get up when I'm doing. You got another thing coming, pal. You mark my words, there's going to be some changes around here, because I am sick and I am tired. I have just about had you up to here. You don't realize how good you got it. You're going to find out. Because you look at me when I talk to you. Don't you look at me like that. Now, I never moved. She wasn't mad enough yet. My mother's philosophy was, first 30,000 didn't get you anywhere. Double it. You think you got it tough? I am going to tell you what tough is. When I was a little girl, I used to walk 18 miles, uphill both ways to school in a foot of nuclear waste, with no shoes. We had one pair that glowed for 14 brothers and sisters. My turn only came around every 2 weeks, always gave my turn away. That's the kind of girl I was. I got up 5 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours before we were even allowed to go to bed. Split a cornflake for breakfast with 8 brothers, carried them to school on my back. And you want to know something? I was grateful for what little I had. What'd you have, Mom? Nothing! You listening? But we were happy children. What are our kids and grandkids going to tell their kids? 550 channels, that's all we got when I was a boy. TV screen was only 78 inches when I was a boy, 2-dimensional. Power buttons and remotes there were up at the top. You had to stretch your thumb there and get that top power button. Sometimes your heart stopped right in there, you know. One winter got so bad. After my mom done shoving the driveway, she only made it halfway up the walk before she collapsed. I had to step over her with my hot chocolates. I spilled some right there. Should have sued her. Now, Pop never said a word. His discipline kicked in. This is not psychologically correct. The experts would be revulsed. Did it work? Sure, because Pop loved me very much. I knew it. He meant it very much. I knew it. If he wasn't going to get action with this one, he's going to act himself. And because I thought he didn't know how to use verbs yet. Hey! Dad, I wash my both cars. I rake the leaves. That had a big wet spot right here, you know. We are a microwave culture. We want results. We want them certainly. We want them now. I fall prey to this. I get up in the morning. I put my mug in the microwave. I punch in 60 seconds, and then about the 30-second mark, I'm doing this. Come on. What's with this thing? How long is this going to take? I haven't got all minute. This has impacted child rearing these days. I have tried everything with this child. Nothing works. Finally, I got so frustrated, I sent him next door to play and moved the family while he was gone. Now, along the way, they tried things that would have worked. But you see, our attention span keeps getting smaller and smaller. Hey, fine. How often do you have somebody come into confession? Bless me, Father, for... Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you just bless me? Because given my age, I don't have any sins left. I mean, you know, how long does it take me to conquer sins? 10 years, 15 years? I mean, that's plenty of time, so I really got no sins left. Or are you like me? Bless me, Father. Look, here's the list, okay? It's the same stuff I've been telling you for the last decades. See, we're allowed to do that, but if this kid doesn't get this after 3 weeks of standing in the corner or 4 months of writing an apology essay and doesn't say, I've been so blind. I see what you're saying. That's why you're the grown-up, and I'm the child. It's also clear to me now. Let's hold hands, sing Kumbaya around the campfire. Alexander, Bell, you guys embarrass me when I'm on the phone. You know that? People call here, I sound like a crazy lunatic. New house rule. From this point forward, when I get on the phone, please be respectful. Don't interrupt. By the way, that includes this. I'm going to excuse myself from the phone. I'm going to put you in your rooms for the rest of the call. You come out, I'll ground you for the day. Now, my clients will say to me, okay, how long do I have to do this? And I will say 20 times, 40, 120. I really have no idea. That'll be $80. And I tell them it doesn't matter. I can give you plenty of ideas. I can't give you the will to do it. That's where it breaks down for most of us. You won't get away with this. Oh, hello, Father Kevin. How are you? Well, sure. Thank you. We'd be flattered to be the role model family for the church children love in. Father, could you just excuse me for 1 second, please? I'm going to have a little love chat with the children. Yeah, well, they're precious blessings from God. You know how that is. We love them desperately. Yeah. Well, they're getting antsy. Yeah, we're half hour past rosary circle. We still pray it in Aramaic on our knees in broken glass, except when we're levitating. Okay. Okay, Father. I'll get them on the extension. They're getting giddy. Peace to you. Harmony. Aquarius. Okay, just 1 second. You're going to die. I'm going to rip your tongue out of your throat, wrap around the fence with a buzzard to pick at you, little maggot. Get away from her. What's that, Father? No, that's a neighbor lady. Uh-huh. She's been talking to her kids like that for years. We do pray for her. I'll ask her to come, but I don't think she likes kids very much. Now, a culture says, why? Culture says, would you please explain to me why that person is acting that way? Part of fallen human nature is we don't look this way first for an explanation. We look this way. I do marriage counseling. Once every 5 or 6 years, I'd like someone to come in my office and begin like this. You know why I'm here? Because it has finally occurred to me. I am extremely difficult to live with. And I had to force my spouse to come in to help me take a good hard look at myself. We look this way. People say, do you see children? I say, no, I don't. I do not see children. I see their parents. I see their grandparents. That's where the change takes place. You're not going to get some 8-year-old to come in. Dr. Ray, might you give me some strategies for managing my anger management issues? It's not going to happen. You got to deal with the big people. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that focuses on the kid. Something is wrong with the kid. Let me give you a few of these. What's wrong with the kid thing? Diet. Cut out anything red. Cut out anything sweet. Cut out anything artificial. Cut out anything that remotely tastes good. Give him a dry cracked wheat brown berry tofutti sandwich on bean sprouts. This kid will get better math scores, kiss his sister on the lips before he paints murals on the church ceiling. One problem with diet. Doesn't have a whole lot of research support. Good for health and nutrition. Our kids' diets are atrocious. But the idea that if I eat this, I'm going to act like this has a very weak link there. That notion has been swallowed whole by our culture. He went to that party last night. He had 3 Reese's peanut butter cups, 2 cans of Mountain Dew, and a Kit Kat. He came home and torched the dog. Now, I told those people, no Kit Kat. It was the Kit Kat. Probably not. Birth order, middle child syndrome. I tell parents, you're that afraid of middle child syndrome, don't have an odd number of kids. You got an odd number, have another one. Give one away. Wipe out that middle spot. Truth on birth order. It only holds one place a little bit. Oldest, only. As a group, a little more independent, a little more achieving. Maybe they develop a shade quicker. I don't think their position. We change our styles. First kid, you boiled everything you came within 50 feet of. Last kid, you throw him this big dirt ball. Say, here, chew on that. Wipe your mouth off in the gas can before you come in the house. First kid, dual videotape of every burp and bowel movement he ever had. Last kid, one snapshot at the birth, one at the wedding rehearsal dinner. Dad, now how come I got no pictures? That's not true, son. Your sister did a popsicle stick sketch in kindergarten. Besides, you look like your sister. Use her pictures. First kid, you sneak into her room every night. You stick a mirror underneath her nostrils. Make sure she's still breathing. Last kid, you tell the dog, get out of the crib. Don't lick him in the face. No, I was talking to the baby. You don't know where that mouse been, poor dog. Somebody asked my wife when our 9th one, Peter, was about 2-3 months old, Petey sleeping through the night yet? My wife says, I don't know if he is. We are. I mean, you kind of get to that point. And you grandparents, you are treacherous people because you lie in wait for us to have children who do to us what we did to you. My mom was at our house many years ago sitting in the kitchen. My mom is 100% Italian. If she doesn't ask me if I'm hungry every 9 seconds, she is seriously depressed. I said, Ma, what are you thinking? Ray, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking you and Randy are getting very sloppy in your parenting. Huh? Elizabeth gets away with murder. Lizzie was 7 at that time. She was the youngest. Andrew or Hannah tried this. You stopped them dead in their tracks. Lizzie, you take a picture of it, you send it out in a Christmas card. Mom, Lizzie doesn't take much discipline. She's a very cooperative child. I'll give you an example. Last night I noticed it was about a half hour past her bedtime. It was about 3 a.m. All I had to say was, Lizzie, bedtime, please. Immediate cooperation. She took out her cigarette. She put it in the ashtray. Now, the other kids flicked their butts on the floor, not Lizzie. In the ashtray. Telling me I'm getting sloppy. When I was in grad school, we got this, and I thought it was going to go away with all the research not supporting it, but it's come back with a horrible vengeance. And this is the idea that there are no differences between men and women. There are no differences between little boys and little girls. They're just socialized into different roles, that's all. Subtle but very powerful gender norming forces. You give a little girl a front end loader, she'll carry it around for 4 years, become a special ops tank commando. You give a little boy a baby doll, he'll carry it around for 4 years, become a nurture and preschool teacher. 50% of little boys will immediately rip the head off that baby doll and turn it into a machine gun. We are wired different. God says it, human history says it, the research says it. For example, little girls, women, are more verbal than little boys, men. They talk earlier, they talk better, they talk longer. That's why if a mom drifts into a discipline trap, it's usually something along these lines. Talk, talk, nag, nag, repeat, repeat, negotiate. Talk, talk, nag, nag, repeat, repeat, negotiate. If a dad drifts into a discipline trap, it's usually something along these lines. Tolerate, tolerate, oblivious, oblivious, ignore, ignore, kill! Tolerate, tolerate, oblivious. My wife had, I have 5 boys and 5 estrogen Americans. My wife had the girls in the big van. I had the boys in my vehicle. She pulls up next to me at the light, looks down at my car, does this. The extent of the conversation in my vehicle took place about 17 miles down the interstate when from the back seat, one of my sons said, "Oh, geez, James, Dad, tell him roll down the window." You ladies are so aware. You just are. You're more detail-oriented. You notice everything. about everybody, at all times, forever, to be used upon men who get to a point in our lives, if we notice our wives are out there, we get extra credit. My little girls would come downstairs before Mass and do this. Sarah, what's the matter? Sarah, it's 20 feet from your bed to here. What could possibly have upset you in that distance? Okay, fine. This is touching me right here. I don't like the way this touches me right here. And my socks are twisted. They got strings on them and they won't stay in a straight line. My boys had come down. James, is that pee on your shirt? Can you see it now, Dad? First day of kindergarten, I asked my son, Andrew, how was school today, buddy? Okay. Good. So what'd you do? Nothing. Or ladies, if you have a very communicative male, stuff. What is the name of the lady who stands in front of you for 6.5 hours? I don't think she told anybody, Dad. Joshua says he's got one called teacher. I'll ask if they're related. First day of kindergarten, I asked my daughter, Hannah, how was school today, baby? Well, okay, Daddy. My teacher's name is Mrs. Bartley. Mrs. Bartley has 3 children, Jessica, Jason, and Ashley. I know their birthdays, favorite colors, and middle names. I'll tell you those later. We had 12 activities. The pumpkin cutting activity, we started at 8:07. Is that a stupid time or what? Ashley was my best friend till she ate 8:30. Then she got mad at me. I don't even know what I did. But Jessica told Tiffany I could be her forever friend till tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Now, Mrs. Bartley has this little brown mark right here. You can't tell it's there unless she goes over by the window and she bends down like this. If she does, the sun comes through the Venetian blinds, off the clock, reflects through her bifocals, forms a prism on the window with a brown dot in it. Daddy, I don't think she knew it was there. So I figure it's about time somebody told her. They both had the same teacher. Psychological correctness is a quagmire. It'll make you overthink as a parent, as a grandparent. Under-enjoy. Certainly you can get better at this. You can gain skills. You can buy my books and tapes. Little subliminal advertising in there. Many of you are grandmothers. And you know the common advice given to grandmothers on a daughter or daughter-in-law's wedding day? It is, sit up, shut up, and wear beige. And that is great advice for us grandparents. I got 6 grandkids. Do I say anything when I see what the kids are doing? Not a word, unless they ask me. And then if they ask me, I get a form. I say, sign this. Gives me permission to speak. You know the biggest clash is between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, by far. That is because the mother-in-laws have their ideas about how this should be done, trying to be helpful. Well, don't you think he needs another coat? Don't you think he's kind of cold? You know, it is kind of cold outside. Why don't I get him some mittens? And the daughter-in-law or the daughter looks at it like, I know how to raise my kid, okay? I don't need you to tell me. I'm just trying to help. So, unless you are asked, say nothing. My son Andrew called me up just a little while back. He says, hey, Dad, can I ask you a question? I said, it's about Rosie. It's his little daughter. He said, yeah. I said, Andrew, you're asking your old man for advice? Yeah, Dad. Wait a minute. And my daughter Hannah, she never said one word to me or my wife about either of her kids saying, hey, Mom, hey, Dad. You know what she does? What'd you guys do when we did that? Are you kidding me? They ain't gonna ask, we ain't gonna say. Like to. Especially when she's being a major league brat, I just kind of sit there. I put my fingers on my ears and I start humming. I can hear her, I can. This is something I'm going to include tomorrow night. Now, tomorrow night, I'm going to give a very different talk. It's going to be called The Logic of Being Catholic. I left the Catholic Church for 8 years. And I came back. And it was logic and evidence that convinced me that the church is who she said she is. I scratched and clawed my way by God's grace. Won't have quite as much humor as tonight, but it'll have its share of humor. But it is a strong case, I believe, for why the church is who she said she is. I think there's evidence for it. So that's tomorrow night. I'm going to do this tonight for those of you who aren't going to be here tomorrow night, but I'm going to do the very same thing tomorrow night. One of the biggest reasons that parents come to me who have raised their children is because their children have left the faith. They've rejected it, they're hostile toward it, or they're indifferent. They don't care. They don't want to hear it. And what happens is, invariably, the parents beat themselves up. Where did we go wrong? How did we fall short? What happened? You know what? It's his fault. Because you wanted to pray the rosary kneeling in hot water. Not him. He let him sit on the couch. Spiritual sloppiness. That's what it was. I'd like to prove to you tonight, logically, if you're doing that to yourself, that your days of beating yourself up are over. Please just answer these questions. Is there a God? Christ God? Was he sinless? Could he perform miracles? Did he have a perfect understanding of human nature? Could he get most people to follow him? Oh, wait a minute. You think you're better at this than the God-man. Can you do a miracle? Can you even do a crummy card trick? Our Lord himself couldn't get most people to follow him. Who do we think we are? There's some kind of spiritual correctness, and you fell short. You know that? You just blew it. Or maybe you say to yourself, I know, but I came back to the faith older, and if I'd have had it when they were younger, well, I'm glad you came back. It's better than nothing. I got 10 kids. My kids are grown. I got some going to serve the church. I got some probably going to serve time. Got one going to Penn State, one going to State Penn. My wife and I will never tie our peace and joy to the decisions our adult children make. We were asked to raise them as best we could. We did. Best we could. I oftentimes ask this to parents. What if God would have come down from the time your oldest was born and whispered instructions into your ear on how to deal with every single situation that came up? Would that guarantee that you'd have a St. John Bosco or a Mother Teresa or a faithful young man? Would that guarantee that? No, of course it wouldn't. Because even God doesn't impose upon free will. So, dear people, and I know there's a bunch of you out here, especially you moms, that have always just agonized. And then, the other thing, too, you can't keep your mouth shut. You keep trying to drop little things about, well, Father Kevin, you'd really like him. He's just such a great young priest. And they're going to have a spaghetti dinner after that. And it doesn't cost anything. So did you want to come? And that's okay. But after they refuse you 5 times, you better be quiet. Don't keep pushing it. Father Kevin, did you want me to take a couple questions? Okay. Now, I'm going to just charge you $50 extra per question. That's right. By the way, my bank told me not to take your checks. Said get cash from those guys. Okay. Yeah. A couple minutes for questions, and I'll let you dear people go. Usually only takes one. Usually somebody goes, okay, our son sets fires. Okay, is that normal? And then everybody else goes, hey, our kid doesn't set fires. He just is a smart mouth. Ask a question. Anything? Yes, ma'am.
I'm a middle school public school
Yes, she's a middle school teacher. You can tell by the twitch. She got the twitch right there. She's a middle school teacher, and they're seeing a lot of kids come back with anxiety, with depression, kind of social shook up because of the COVID response. Not because of COVID, because of the COVID response. And the research is coming out all over the place now. It is indisputable that our response was absolutely atrocious. It caused problems beyond anything they anticipated, not the least of which, a recent survey said 58% of teenage girls now in the last year claim to have been depressed, and 30% seriously contemplated suicide. Not all related to COVID, of course, but COVID just kind of put the gas pedal down on it. So your question, how do you know? Well, you can't really know, okay? You're not God. You have to operate out of the philosophy that even if the decision-making power, the learning-making power is limited, it's not gone. It's not like a parent will say to me, well, he's 7 years old, but he has the development of a 4-year-old. Maybe I shouldn't discipline him. And I say, would you discipline a 4-year-old? Yes. Well, then you can discipline him. He may not catch on like a 7-year-old, but you can discipline. Same thing. So much of what we're looking at, and I've been at this business 45 years, folks. Unfortunately, we're raising messed up kids across the board. And the biggest reason is the cultural shaping. You can get wonderful grandparents and parents, good people, but that culture is so powerful. Those kids, you know as well as I do, in 8th grade, you teach 8th grade? You know as well as I do, if there's one kid in there who doesn't yet have a smartphone, he's a weirdo. You know that. That is the most absurd thing to do, to give a smartphone to a 13-year-old. That is nuts. But everybody does it. So then when the kids turn around and someone like yourself has to try to entertain them when they've got the whole world in the palm of their hand the rest of the day, you can't compete with that, much less it's sewage. Want to hear an interesting stat? You know how many boys ages 11 to 19 have seen pornography? 90. 90. So when you as a teacher are dealing with that, you got to make some tough decisions. But here's, I think, what you face. Okay, so you put your standards up where they belong. You're going to get grief. By the parents, by the administration. You're going to get grief. I saw a survey. 55% of public school educators seriously considering not returning to school in the next year. That's what's happening. I think you have to act according to the things you believe those kids are capable of, even if they're quote unquote anxious or socially struggling, because you compound the problem. My kids, some of them had some really serious brain damage, okay, because they got drugs and alcohol in the womb, just fries your brain out. My wife and I still had to put the bar here. We had to. Even though some of them didn't reach it as easy, we still had to have a bar. Because we couldn't gauge. I couldn't go, dear God, tell me what percentage he still has left available. You don't know. You can't know. Now, if you got some that are kind of seriously messed up, okay, you make the referral as best you can. But the bulk of what's in your class is capable. But the biggest thing you're dealing with is the entertainment capacity outside your classroom. And that's why Father, who prays Mass, who when these teenage kids come in who have been stimulated through video cocaine for 6, 8, 10 hours a day, and that's how much some of them are doing, especially video games for males. Here's what he looks like when he's up here to them. Lift up your hearts. And they're going, come on, man. Who writes this guy's monologue, man? It's the same stuff I heard last week. Yeah, that's the thing we're dealing with. I was real pleased to see all these kids come out of here. I didn't see that many kids in a mass in a long time. I was wonderful. Of course, had CCD, right? But still, they're here. Wonderful. Bring some of them tomorrow night, because they will hear why this church that we believe in is the truth. Because if it ain't the truth, dump it. So you're right. It's really hard to gauge. But you can't drop your standards. You know, American kids already compete the lowest in developed countries around the world. They do. That's because we've dropped our standards. Why? Because the psychologists have convinced you they can't do it. They have emotional issues that are just blocking their doing it. So what do is we shortchange them. Be strong. Reality is going to prove you right. Yes, ma'am? You're a shrink? Oh, that's why you were gone. He's terrible. He's terrible. He's got to shut up. Yep. Yep. Oh, of course. It's horrible. It's horrible. Mm-hmm. Couple of things. If you have the ability to deal with the parents, go through the parents. Point out to the parents what you're seeing. You know, I like your son a lot, but I'll tell you, he just seems to be bothered by a lot of stuff. Does he have a smartphone? Well, how long ago did he get it? When he was 11. So he's had it for 4 years? What kind of protection do you have on it? Most don't have any protection at all. Okay. So you can go through the parents. I work with the parents. When I get referrals for 11, 12, 13-year-olds, I don't even see them. I want to see the parents. But here's the other thing I'm spending a lot of my time doing. I am trying to shore up those minority parents who are going against that culture, because they're looking around them going, the people I trust don't agree with me. My parents or my church people. I'm all alone at this. And I say, yeah, you are. And you got to have the strength to know that what you're doing is right. That's what I do. I really work hard on shoring up parents, especially the ones that really try. You know, the mom will come in and say, I can't control him because if I took that phone, he'd go crazy. He'd smash something against the wall. And I'll tell you, that shows you how addicted he is to that phone. People will say to me, what's the number one thing I can do? Good parents will say to me, what's the number one thing I can do to sabotage my parenting? Oh, that's easy. Smartphone. That's easy. It's not even close. Okay, so that's the first thing I go after. The other thing you go after is, of course, the gender confusion. You know, there's a recent survey said 20% of teenagers said they are LGBTQ. 20%. In all of our surveys, it's been between 1 and 2. 20%. That's a social contagion. But you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say that. We can't say the emperor has no clothes. So what I do when I get a parent like that who comes in and says, my 13-year-old daughter says she's a boy or she wants to be a boy and she's really confused and all this, I question the parent. I say, okay, has she had gender problems up to this point? No. Who's she hanging with? How much does she have unfettered access to this? Have you asked her questions on how this came about? Well, she has one girlfriend who's kind of like, okay, so you want her hanging around with this girlfriend? I mean, you got to just explore the whole issue. You can't just go, oh, okay, all right, here's the hormones, which is partly what we're doing. And then when that happens, because you know as well as I do, you stand up against that, they're going to look at you like, hater. Yeah, I know. It is true. And it's an interesting phenomenon, which is the people of faith who have a standard here are now viewed as really the people you got to watch. Okay, that's the reality. That is flat out. You know, I always tell this to parents. My children are all grown now. I can live with myself if when my children went astray, they had to go through me, not because I stepped aside. I couldn't live with myself if I did this. If I did this and they still went astray, okay. I think that's what you're dealing with. That's what I'm dealing with. You know what the number one referrals I now get? I never used, 20 years ago, none of these. Gender confusion. Total out of control, hostile, punch parent rebellion, where the parent is the adversary. In human history, that's never happened. That has never happened. I had a friend of mine who was in Saddam Hussein's army, First Gulf War. He trains Marines. And he said, we were conscripts. We were thrown in the desert. We were thrown in these holes. And when the Americans came through, we got up and went like this, because we're just totally outclassed. And I asked him, I said, Raheem, did the children in Iraq act like American children? He looked at me like I was absolutely nuts. He said, no. I said, well, come on. These are 15-year-old kids, and what if they just decide you don't know anything and they fight you? He goes, that happens. Not very often. I said, well, what do you guys do? He goes, they're out. Now, that might sound very cruel. They come back. But he basically said, we don't allow it. We just simply do not allow it. You know. So you can say we're so sophisticated, okay, but look at our results. I mean, you look at the statistics, they're scary. They're just frightening. So I don't mean to pontificate. I do have the books available: Discipline, Faith, Marriage, Emotions, Living Calm. There's about 17 of them out there. You can take a look and see which one you want. They all come with a Springer guarantee. Your children, your grandchildren will never be on Jerry Springer, okay? Unless that's from a past life. I can't do anything about that. I want to close with this. I think this is critical, very important. Got some long-standing marriages in here. I want to celebrate those. Elderly gentleman and his wife were shopping. She bends over, she picks up a can of clean peaches, sticks it under her coat, tries to walk out without paying. Woo! Goes before the judge. What'd you do? Stole a can of peaches. How many in a can? 12. 12 days in the county jail then. Her husband can't believe this. This guy's a hanging judge. Your Honor, please, may I speak up? Go ahead. She also stole a can of peas. Thanks for coming. I hope to see some of you tomorrow night.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. Thank you for coming tonight. If you like tonight's talk, please come tomorrow at 7 p.m. Please bring a friend with you. We also have calendars in the back with all of our events during this year. Maybe we can just end with an Our Father. Just remember, we need God's help to do all these things. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. This day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Have a great night, everyone.